The overwhelming success of the Allied armies in the greatest of all wars was based on many factors, but primarily the achievement of the GIs.
I have the proud privilege of speaking for a victorious army of almost 5 million fighting men. They and the women who have so ably assisted them constitute the Allied expeditionary forces that have liberated Western Europe. They have captured or destroyed enemy armies totaling more than their own strength. They have pushed triumphantly forward over the hundreds of miles, separating Cherbourg from Lübeck, Munich, and Leipzig. Merely to name my principal supporters in the Canadian, French, American, and British forces is to present a picture of the utmost in efficiency, skill, loyalty, and devotion to duty. The United Nations will gratefully remember Tedder, Montgomery, Spaatz, Bradley, Milot, Freer, and many others. But all these agree with me in the selection of the truly heroic figure of this war. He is G.I. Joe and his counterpart in the air, the Navy, and the merchant marine of every one of the United Nations. He has braved the dangers of U-boat infested seas. He has surmounted charges in the desperately defended beaches. He has fought his tedious, patient way through the ultimate in fortified zones. He has endured cold, hunger, fatigue. His companion has been danger. Death has dogged his footsteps. He and his platoon commanders have given us an example of loyalty, devotion to duty, and indomitable courage that will live in our hearts as long as we admire those qualities in men.
In June 1945, General Eisenhower returned to the United States by government order to participate in a series of celebrations throughout the country for victorious American troops from the European theater. America greeted its heroes with wild acclaim in a stirring tribute to the men who had won the victory.
The first and most enduring lesson of the Mediterranean and European campaigns was the proof that war can be waged effectively by a coalition of nations. Historic difficulties had been overcome, and the grave doubts that had existed on this point had been completely dispelled. Governments and their subsidiary economic, political, and military organizations had combined into one great effort in which no major difficulty could be traced to diverging national interests. Allied effectiveness in World War II established for all time the feasibility of developing and employing joint control machinery that can meet the sternest tests of war. The key to the matter is a readiness on highest levels to adjust all nationalistic differences that affect the strategic employment of combined resources, and in the war theater, to designate a single commander who is supported to the limit. With these two things done, success rests in the vision, the leadership, the skill, and the judgment of the professionals making up command and staff groups. In World War II, America and Great Britain understood and applied these truths. Foremost among the military lessons was the extraordinary and growing influence of the airplane in the waging of war. The European campaign almost daily developed new and valuable uses for air power. Its effect in the weakening of German capacity was decisively felt on both the eastern and western fronts. Beyond this, the airplane was a valuable logistics agent, particularly during our speedy dashes across France and later across Germany. Without it, those pursuits could never have proceeded with such speed, nor could they have accomplished such remarkable results. The combination of an overwhelming air force and the great mobility of ground forces enabled us to strike any chosen point along a front of hundreds of miles. Our experiences had reaffirmed the truth that unity, coordination, and cooperation are the keys to successful operations. War is waged in three elements: the there is no separate land, air, or naval war. Unless all assets in all elements are efficiently combined and coordinated against a properly selected common objective, their maximum potential power cannot be realized. Physical targets may be separated by the breadth of a continent or an ocean, but their destruction must contribute in maximum degree to the furtherance of the combined plan of operation. That is what coordination means. We re-examined the role of the fundamental agent in military success, the individual soldier. A trained American possesses qualities that are almost unique. Because of his initiative and resourcefulness, his adaptability to change, and his readiness to resort to expedient, he becomes, when he has attained a proficiency in all the normal techniques of battle, a most formidable soldier. Veteran organizations are normally more capable than those entering battle for the first time. However, experience in fighting does not engender any love of the battlefield. Veterans have no greater desire to enter the bullet-swept areas than have green troops. They do become more skillful in the utilization of every advantage offered by firepower, maneuver, and terrain. They acquire a steadiness that is not shaken by the confusion and destruction of battle. Early in the war, it became evident that the emotional stamina and spiritual strength of the individual soldier were as important in battle success as his weapons and training. In any kind of warfare, troop morale is a decisive factor. The campaigns in the Mediterranean and in Europe had no prior parallel in the history of warfare. Throughout them, the United States Army had engaged in operations without comparable precedent since its establishment in 1775. For the operations in Africa and Europe, there had been involved the organization of a vast ground force, built around 47 infantry divisions and their artillery. Some divisions bore far more than their share of combat. The 34th, 45th, 3rd, and 1st Divisions led in the number of days in battle, with total days in combat between 438 and more than 500. No pre-war definition of the Army's mission could adequately have forecast the scope or ramifications of its job against the European Axis. Victory in the Mediterranean and European campaigns gave the lie to all who preached or shall preach that the democracies are decadent, afraid to fight, unable to match the productivity of regimented economies, unwilling to sacrifice in a common cause. In dozens of ways, scientists and inventors transformed the face of war. Early in July, I learned that there would be a test in New Mexico of the atomic bomb, which American scientists had finally succeeded in developing. At the time, I expressed the hope that we would never have to use such a thing against any enemy, because I disliked seeing the United States take the lead in introducing into the war something as horrible and destructive as this new weapon was described to be. I did not then know, of course, that an army of scientists had been engaged in the production of the weapon, and that secrecy in this vital matter could not have been maintained indefinitely.
But in July 1945, at Alamogordo, New Mexico, the most critical experiment in centuries was shrouded in secrecy.
The automatic controls got it now. Rob, this time the stakes are really high.
It's going to work all right, Robert, and I'm sure we'll never be sorry for it.
But in 40 seconds, we'll know.
Only such leading atomic scientists as Dr. Vannevar Bush, Harvard President James Bryant Conant, and a few top government officials knew what was about to happen.
Minus 10 seconds. Minus 5 seconds. Now!
developments in method, equipment, and destructive power that we were studying seemed minor innovations compared to the revolutionary impact of the atom bomb. The reports that reached us after the first one was used against the enemy at Hiroshima on August 6th left no doubt in our minds that a new era of warfare had begun. In an instant, many of the old concepts of war were swept away. Henceforth, it would seem, the purpose of an aggressor nation would be to stock atom bombs in quantity and to employ them by surprise against the industrial fabric and population centers of its intended victims. Even the bombed ruins of Germany suddenly seemed to provide but faint warning of what future war could mean to the people of the earth. But on all sides, there was evidence of the destruction that Hitler's ruthless ambition had brought about. Germany's bridges were down, her cities in ruins, and her great industrial capacity practically paralyzed. Between September 1939 and May 1945, millions of Europeans had been killed and many millions more left homeless. In Germany itself, after years of seeming invincibility, a carpet of destruction and desolation had spread over the land. Of all the distressing memories that will forever live with American veterans of the war in Europe, none will be sharper or more enduring than those of the DPs, the truly unfortunate, who, for one reason or another, no longer had homes or were persecutees who dare not return home for fear of further persecution. Volumes have been, and more volumes will be written, on the collapse of world cooperation and the true significance of the events that accompanied the tragedy. I felt and hoped that the lessons which 6 years of unremitting war had brought to the world would convince everyone everywhere that the employment of force in the international field should of necessity be abjured. With the evidence of the most destructive war yet waged by the people of the earth about me, I gained increased hope that this development of what appeared to be the ultimate in destruction would drive men in self-preservation to find a way of eliminating war. Maybe it is only wishful thinking to believe that fear, universal fear, might possibly succeed where statesmanship and religion had not yet won success.
The first major post-war problem for the Allies in Europe was the administration of conquered Germany, a task which demanded ready cooperation and mutual confidence among the victors.
From the record of Russian contacts with the Western Allies during the war, we believed in the early summer of 1945 that success in joint government of Germany would be measured almost exclusively by the degree to which the Western Allies, both generally and locally, overcame Russian suspicion and distrust. There was a vast gulf to be bridged between governmental systems.
For all the peoples of the world, 1945 was a most critical year. A month before the end of the war in Europe, free people in all parts of the globe were stunned by a tragic loss.
The day of April 12th ended on a note of dramatic climax when we heard the news of President Roosevelt's death. We pondered over the effect the president's death might have upon the future peace.
25 years ago, American fighting men looked to the statesmen of the world to furnish the work of peace for which they fought and suffered. We failed them. We failed them then. We cannot fail them again and expect the world to survive again.
If all nations were willing to pool partial authority in a single headquarters with power to enforce their decisions, international unity could be attained. In the formation of the United Nations, however, this lesson had not yet been accepted. The compelling necessities of the moment leave us no alternative to the maintenance of real and respectable strength, not only in our moral rectitude and our economic power, but in terms of adequate military preparedness. To neglect this, pending universal resurgence of a definite spirit of cooperation, is not only foolish, it is criminally stupid. Thorough technical, psychological, and physical training is one protection and one weapon that every nation can give to its soldiers before committing them to battle. But since war always comes to a democracy as an unexpected emergency, this training must be largely accomplished in peace. Until world order is an accomplished fact and universal disarmament a logical result, it will always be a crime to excuse men from the types and kinds of training that will give them a decent chance for survival in battle. The lessons of 1914 and 1939 remain valid so long as the world has not learned the futility of making competitive force the final arbiter of human questions.